Hello, and welcome to the Write Club podcast, where we take you behind the pages and into the fascinating world of writing. I'm Beth, and this is Mary, and we're part of the team at Writing Magazine and Writers Online. Hi, Mary, how are you today?
I'm really well, thank you. I'm very excited about our guest this week. Sue Moorcroft is a Sunday Times best-selling author, winner of multiple awards, and president of the Romantic Novelists Association. Her novels of love and life have captivated readers across the UK, US, Canada, and beyond. Sue, welcome. Where are you joining us from today?
Hello, Mary, and hi, Beth. Thank you very much. I'm in Northamptonshire. I'm in my study, which is over our garage. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I've had quite a long association with Writing Magazine on and off because I used to write columns for you years ago and also help judge your competitions.
You and your writing space, then, can you just give us
Yes.
a bit of a description of it?
Okay, so it's quite a big room. For 30 years, I worked in a back bedroom, which is, sort of shoebox sized. But now I have the room over the garage, which has been variously a playroom and a music room, and somewhere where my son's mates used to crash. So it's quite a big room. I've got skylight behind me and another one round the corner. It's an odd shaped room. Got all my books that I've written, and I call that my bragging shelf, in all their different languages and etc. And I'm sitting at one of my desks. I'm very spoilt these days. I have two desks. So I've got one over there with like a postal station and the printer and stuff like that. And then this L-shaped book desk is where I work. So I've got computer here and sort of a handwriting area there.
Amazing. It sounds like you got such a good setup there.
Yes, yeah, compared to what I used to have. Yeah, yeah.
There's me currently sat on my sofa with a blanket over the top of me.
Yeah. I have got my big, thick, fluffy boots on that double as slippers and stuff like that. Yeah, I haven't bothered with makeup or my best glasses or anything as it's a podcast.
You spent a lot of time in libraries as a child, so I just wondered, can you recall a particular book that made you think, yeah, I really want to be a writer?
Uh, well, I did spend a lot of time in libraries. I'm lucky enough to come from a reading family, and so being taken to the library as a child was quite common. And also I was an army kid. When we came out of the army, we came to live in a town quite close to here, Wellingborough in Northamptonshire. And I didn't we moved just before the summer holidays, and I was the misfit because all the other kids had been together for, like 8 years, and I didn't know anybody. And I was used to moving schools where everybody was used to moving schools. So it was quite a different experience. So I basically spent my summer holidays in Wellingborough Library, and you were only allowed to take 3 books a week out. And what good's that to anyone? So I used to go and sit in their window seat in a bay window and just read an entire book. So it's really hard for me to pick out one book. Um, the first adult book that made an impression on me was A Town Like Alice, which was my dad's copy. He had or my parents had a kind of piece of furniture in the hall called the bureau, and it was a bookcase at the bottom. And he used to supervise what I borrowed from there. Um, I used to read loads of Enid Blyton and also boys' books. I've got two older brothers, so Billy Bunter and things like that were always in the house. So I used to pick them up from the library as well. I remember books about wolves called Jack and Finn. The wolves might be Jack London. Maybe that's where the Jack comes from. So, short answer is no, I can't remember one particular book. There's just so many.
I read that your teacher once predicted that there will be books with Sue Moorcroft on the spine. What was that moment like for you, and did you believe it?
Well, I've got to be honest and say I didn't like him. He was a very scary teacher, and I'm not a shrinking violet. So for him to scare me, there must have been other children in that class who really were frightened by him. But yeah, he liked English and stories and stuff, and he did say that to me. Um, and yes, it did. It was kind of a career defining moment, even though I was 10. because it made it seem possible that rather than people who write books being some kind of immortal being that normal people couldn't aspire to being, if he thought that it was possible, then maybe it was possible. And he's one of the reasons I write under my maiden name of Moorcroft. There are a couple of others, one about identity and another that my married name is Matthews, and Carol Matthews was doing very nicely at the time, so there didn't seem any point trying to do anything with that name. But yeah, he was, yeah, good old Mr. Williams. I remember him fondly.
I wonder
Not
if he'll be giving this a listen.
well, I would be very surprised. He was just about before retirement then, so he was probably older then than I am now. No, I'm probably older now than he was then, I mean. So I'd be surprised if he was still able to listen.
Just goes to show what influence a teacher can have, though, saying
Yes,
something like that to.
yes. I have another quick teacher anecdote if you want it, where I got caught out in this giant lie when we lived in Malta, and it was all to do with the school bus. And my dad caught me out in this giant lie, but I'd embarrassed him because he'd put in a complaint about what had happened on the bus, and it never happened. And so one of the things I had to do, I had to apologize to my parents, apologize to the bus driver, and I had to apologize to my form teacher, Miss Wishart. And I didn't want to because it was nothing to do with her, and I didn't like her either. She wasn't the teacher who'd been involved, but I was called out at registration to tell everybody what I'd done. So I had to explain that I'd concocted this giant lie, which both parents had believed, by the way. And she said to me, Susan Moorcroft, you'll never get anywhere making up stories. Oh, 25 books in, Miss Wishart. Actually, I did.
Oh, that's brilliant. Before becoming a full-time writer, you worked in various roles, from banking to journalism and even typesetting. How did those experiences shape your approach to storytelling?
The bank, because I'm a bit of a nosy person. I think a lot of authors are. You hear a good anecdote and you want to know more. Somebody tells you about an interesting job they do, and you say, "Oh, can I have your phone number and talk to you about this in case I want to put it in a book?" So from that point of view, I really learned how important money is. A lot of the stories I heard working on the lending team were sad. But money was obviously, because I was in a bank, money was always at the crux of it. So anything to do with finance in my books, I like to think works. It's well researched. I never gloss over, when you get people in some books, they jump into a car that doesn't belong to them and drive it. And I'm thinking, what about the insurance? She hasn't had time to put the payment through on the insurance or whatever. So those little lapses, I hope, don't happen in my books. I wasn't as such a journalist. I worked for Motorcycle News, but it was a non-writing capacity. I was typing. I was trained as a secretary. I wish I had me as my own secretary now, actually, because I could use me. But it taught me a lot. It taught me how to use a computer terminal for text, because when I'd been in the bank, it was typewriters mainly. I'd used computers for getting balances out for customers and for looking up county court judgments and things like that. But otherwise, it was typewritten. So they trained me onto what we now think of as personal computers, and even how freelancers were regarded by staff members was not really they weren't high in their estimation, and they had quite a rude name for them. But listening to those staff members talk made me very realistic. So, for instance, if I sent a column into Writing Magazine and it was refused, it was rejected, I didn't take the hump and say, well, I'm not going to try them again. I just realized that I hadn't sent in the correct thing. There was something wrong with my submission, whether you had the same thing from somebody else, it's too similar, or more importantly, it wasn't in your style or to length. And so just sitting there while I was taking reports from correspondents, they were called stringers, around the country, I would be taking the sports reports for the sports that had taken place on Sunday and I would be there Sunday evening and night taking those reports. And just listening to those journalists' work made me really realistic. And I think that stayed with me. I still never take the hump about the rejection. I still realise that there was a reason for it, even if it was just that the magazine was chock-a-block.
That's excellent advice because unfortunately rejection is part of a writer's life.
Oh yes. Luckily, I don't have as much now. I do have magazines come to me and ask for my work, which is just amazing. I had 20 years from selling my first short story to The People's Friend to when I could make a living as a novelist, 20 years. And I do a talk called 20 Years to Be an Overnight Success because that was working all the time. I did do these other jobs in the evening, like Motorcycle News and the typesetters. And I did my husband's bookkeeping for him as well. Anything to ensure I didn't have to go and get a proper job again. I still could keep some time for writing. And I would take any job to do with writing. So, like judging your competitions, even writing letters for magazines, or I praised other people's manuscripts, anything that was to do with writing that meant I didn't have to go back to the bank or do any full-time job that meant I couldn't write or my time for writing was too diminished. So it took me a while, but it worked in the end.
Kind of on that then, were there any sort of obstacles that you've had to overcome sort of in your writing journey, and how did you find your way through those?
Well, never give up is the best mantra, I think. Yes, the obstacles are many, many, many. Um, I was very lucky, I'm very lucky to have a supportive husband. I've come good in the end, so I'm the main breadwinner now. But for many years, he was the main breadwinner. And even when he had a career blip, he didn't say to me, could you go and get a full-time job for a couple of years while we get through this? And that makes a huge difference because I hear a lot of people say, well, I've got to work. And even if they haven't got to work, their partner doesn't see their writing journey as valid because it's not earning enough money yet. So, how many people can afford those 20 years of scratching around for the money? Really, not everybody. I was lucky to win, a bursary here, a conference place there, that kind of thing, which also helped. So I've done the opposite of answer your question, really. I've told you what weren't obstacles. I think the biggest what obstacle was the lack of success for so long. That there were small successes or smaller than I'm, lucky enough to achieve now, where I had this short story accepted, that column accepted. Then I was given a regular column. I had two regular columns with Writers Forum, who sadly have folded, but I had regular columns there and a regular judging gig as well. So it was always lack of success was my biggest, and lack of money, therefore, my biggest obstacle. But I just never gave up, and I always cut my coat according to my cloth. So if I couldn't afford to go to a conference, I didn't go to the conference. I didn't give up. I didn't go, oh well, if I can't go and meet all these editors and agents in person, then I won't go. I won't write anymore. At one time, I was very put off by rejection in the early days with magazines. If I got a rejection, and they were common, it would stop me writing for 3 or 4 days. And then I thought, well, this is no good. This is just such a waste of time. So my new strategy, it was letters in those days, not emails. It wouldn't work as well with an email, was I'd screw up the letter and throw it at the wall, shout a rude word, and go upstairs and start writing again. So that's a bit of a homespun way of, but you find your own way in life, don't you?
Absolutely.
And how did you stay motivated in those sort of 20 years where you were really trying to make it? I mean, that's such a long time.
It is, yeah.
I would have given it like 5 years and given up, but you persevered. So
Yeah.
what was it that kind of kept you going?
Um, if you don't mind me using the phrase, bloody mindedness is some of it. that I am a persistent, self-motivated person. I come into this room 5 days a week and work 10 or 11 hours. And like yesterday, I worked all day and then I went and did an event. So I got home at 9:45. So that's the sort of work day you sometimes get, not all the time. Um, but it's just a compulsion to write, and I like the success. I hope that doesn't sound too big-headed, but I feel like I've earned it and I enjoy it. So a couple of days ago, I got sent some large print editions of my books, and putting them on that shelf behind me is such a rush. It really is. I just really enjoy finding it its spot with all the rest of, the editions of that particular title, putting it in there in order and putting a little photo on social media to say I got these today and they're really pretty and everything. And so I think I always had some successes. Over 10 years ago, I stopped counting short stories, and I stopped counting at about 150. And then there were all those columns. So there was always some success. It's just I wasn't making, well, there were a couple of years where I did make a living, but that was out of everything, all the judging, all the appraising, I did a lot of tutoring. And I wrote a writer's guide and anything people would pay me for. If they were daft enough to offer me money, I was daft enough to do the work, really. And so you keep getting these small successes. Every step is a good one. There's no such thing as a bad success, is there?
No, it's very true. And a lot of your novels have topped bestseller charts worldwide. So, what was your breakthrough moment when you realized, yes, I finally made it? All of it's been worth it.
Well, I got a new agent, I think in 2014, Juliet Pickering from Blake Friedman. I'd been with an agent, hadn't worked so well, and then I did 7 books just with a publisher, not with an agent. And then I decided that I needed an agent again. So I went to Blake Friedman, and Juliet liked my work and I was thrilled to bits to work with her. And well, not straight away because we worked on a book called The Christmas Promise together. And then she sold it to Avon HarperCollins, who I've done 18 or 19 books with now. I think the next one will be 19 books. And so that was one big moment. But they got that book to #1 on Amazon Kindle in the UK. So I wasn't in this room then. I was in the little room next door. It was a Sunday morning. And I'd been second and third like all week, and that had been heady enough. And there was an author who was with Amazon Publishing. They have 4 or 5 of their own imprints. And she was with one of those, and she was at #1 with a Christmas book. And I thought, well, I'm never going to get there because they'll want their own author there. They'll just be throwing all the advertising and everything at it. Publishing's a business. And then that morning, I turned my machine on, and my husband came in and said, where's your book now? And I said, well, it's at #2, but this other Christmas book isn't at #1. Georgette Heyer, somebody has found some of her short stories, and they've published them, and she's come back from the grave to keep me off the #1 spot. And I was joking about it and showing him that on my shelf in front of me, I had all of Georgette Heyer's books. She was a big favorite of mine. And so he went off, and somebody said something to me about my chart position. And I answered it thinking I was #2 and saying, yeah, it was such a wonderful thing. And I'd never imagined I'd do so well. And then I looked again and I was #1. And it was absolutely amazing. I was getting messages from my editor and my agent. I was getting big authors saying congratulations to me on social media. And I went back to this friend and said, oh, I'm at #1 now. She said, well, what did you think I was telling you? I said, oh, I don't know. I'd missed that. And then after all that, I thought, oh, I better go and tell my husband. So, and that was when I got emotional about it, when I tried to tell him and sort of made this pathetic little cheer. So I think that was one of the real turning points of my career. And then 2 books later, well, Avon had bought 2 books, Christmas Promise and Just for the Holidays. And then for the next contract, instead of my agent pitching me to my editor kind of pitched to her and said, our next landmark, our next goal for Sue is to make her a Sunday Times bestseller. And I looked at my computer screen and said aloud, well, good luck with that then. But they did it with the very first book of that 3-book contract, The Little Village Christmas, and several others have hit the bestseller lists as well, done very well in various countries. So Avon, they have my world English language rights. So any success I have in Canada and America is also they control. But then my agency sells me in different languages to different countries. So I'm in 14 languages. So I've had the pleasure of hitting good targets with Germany, Italy, Denmark. I'm sure I've missed one. But yeah, so it's all comes from never giving up.
Fantastic. That's really amazing. Your books often explore love, family, and community. What draws you to these themes, and how do you keep them fresh with every novel?
Well, romantic fiction is my thing. I like to read it. I really like to read romantic suspense, but I don't think I've quite got the right mind for the crime side of that. I find relationships generally interesting. I find people interesting. Sometimes my husband would say, well, what made you ask that? So I'm just interested, I want to know what your mum and your sisters are and nieces and nephews are doing, things like that. I am just interested in relationships. I'm interested in what people will do for love. That book, A Town Like Alice. Neville Shute was a rock star author in his day. He died the year before I was born, so his books are dated now. But he wrote contemporaneously about the Second World War. He was in it. He was in both World Wars actually. And in A Town Like Alice, the hero is literally crucified for the love of the heroine. He's tortured for her, which doesn't sound a very romantic book, but it is. It's one of the most sweeping, epic love stories. And I think that book set me on that road of people are more interesting than things. So while I can enjoy a crime book for the cleverness of the plotting, I'm actually more interested in the interaction. And when it comes down to it, people only do things for, well, they do them for money, but mainly you do the really important things for other people. Who you choose to live with, have as a romantic partner, is one of the most important decisions you make. And you might have to remake that decision in a few years and remake it again. That's because we all change. But what I tell is that story of happiness, really. But in real life, our happiness comes around all the real things that happen, whether you've suffered a bereavement, lost your job, got a new job, got a new dog, whatever good or bad things happening to you, the progress of your relationship happens around it. So that's what I write about, really, the progress of that relationship. If I kept on it another 10 years and they hated each other and one of them was buried under the patio, it would be a different book. But I choose to write that. And I am very interested in real issues. So I've written about head injury, neurological conditions. I've just written 4 books in a row about adoption. I'm writing now about 3 half sisters who only one of them knew the father. And they've now come together over an inheritance. And so these real life issues really interest me. But the fact that we still fall in love as well is like at the heart of it. Oh, that was a pun. It wasn't meant to be.
Do you plot meticulously, or do you let the story
No.
unfold?
You know how usually people are called plotters or pantsters?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm a composter. So I like to amass this heap of stuff. It's often as it's a podcast, there's not much point me showing you some of my notebooks that I've got scattered around the desk, but I have got bits and pieces of paper. I like to start, something sparks a book. Maybe it's a memory, maybe it's an anecdote somebody else tells me, maybe it's something I feel strongly about, but something sparks a book. I write in a similar genre all the time because readers don't want to pick up a Sue Moorcroft book and find that it's not a Sue Moorcroft book, and they'll feel cheated and they'll never buy anything of mine again, and I don't blame them. So yet you develop within that, I suppose. So I start with the spark, and I start with the two main characters, and I get to know them in handwriting in a notebook. And I write them quite a detailed biography, but it's not so much about what colour's her hair, what colour are his eyes, although I do need to know those things. It's more about what's their backstory, because no character was born on page one. And how you react to something in your past informs your front story. So say you've been cheated upon in the past, that's going to affect how you react to the suspicion that you're being cheated on again. Are you going to be relaxed, or are you going to forever on be a jealous person because of this thing that happened to you before? If you were brought up very poor, when you get some money, when you make some money, are you no good with money because you've never had any to practice on? Or do you spend it all because that's what you've got money, you've never had money before? Or do you hoard it because you're scared of the bad times that might come again? So the backstory is really important. And the other really important things are her or his conflicts and goals. And if I can get those goals to conflict, like her goals to conflict with his goals, maybe they both want the same thing, maybe they want the opposite. Like if she's trying to save an old building and he owns the company that's come to knock it down, then that you've got instant conflict between them, between their goals. That's a very simple. I'll try and be a bit more nuanced, but you know. So when I get to that stage, I like to write about them by hand still, from the point of view of all the other important people in their lives, because I think we're different with different people. We're different with our parents than we are with our children, than we are with our boss, than we are with our buddies. I mean, just my language changes. When I'm with my brothers, swear my head off. I never used to swear in front of my mum. She's not with us anymore, but you know, I would always, I'm sure I could have got to 100 and she still would have told me off for swearing. So that kind of thing makes you different. And so I look at them from those different perspectives, and I think that gives me a multifaceted character then. And I will look at their flaws as well as, you know, it's just not everybody's gorgeous, and so they naturally fall in love, you know. We've all got flaws, we've all got things in the past that affect us. So when I get quite a lot of pages scribble, I don't write neatly, I get the urge start and I write probably the first 10,000 words. And those 10,000 words I enjoy writing more than the whole of the rest of the book, because nothing's gone wrong yet. I'm a big Formula One fan, and it's like being on the grid at the start of a race. You haven't come off at the first corner, you haven't broken down, you haven't gone the wrong way somewhere. There's everything to play for, and so far it's got to be right. And even though it's not at 70,000 words, you'll see what's wrong with the first 10,000 and go back and fix them. At that time, they're right.
You've been traditionally published, obviously, by HarperCollins. So,
Yeah.
what's been your biggest learning curve in the publishing world?
I think moving from a small publisher to a big publisher, when I'd been with a smaller publisher for 7 books, Chocolate, and it had been quite cozy. It was literally somebody's kitchen table project it began as, and she did very well. And then when I signed for Juliet and she got me with HarperCollins, it was much more, there's much more of a schedule to everything. Every little thing, you know, you can get a schedule for you send your book in. So that's usually the end of March and September for me. The winter book is the end of March and summer book is the end of September. And then you will get a schedule for when you get your structural edits back, and you'll be given like 2 or 3 weeks. By negotiation, if I looked at it and said, oh, there's a lot there, Helen, can I have 4 weeks? Then she would, but she's got a lot of other things on her schedule apart from me, other authors, and she's the publishing director, so she's got an awful lot of leadership roles, I'm sure. And then I will get, if I have line edits, because sometimes she combines the two, but if I have line edits, same thing, copy edits, same thing, proof, same thing. So everything's on a schedule. It's all over my calendar all the time. Deadlines are always in blue to make sure that, there's nothing else I can confuse them with. So I would say that was probably the biggest difference. But I'm a very pragmatic person, and I don't mind asking questions if I don't understand something. I'm very lucky to have a great agent who I can bother her with the smallest thing, and she'll say, well, I'll find that out for you, or no, that's fine, they won't mind that, or maybe we should hold back on that until something else. So having that guidance has been wonderful. But really, I just think the whole thing is a learning curve, from selling my first letter to the Sun for £10 to being in the situation I'm in now, which is comfortable, and with another 3-book contract ahead, and a backlist behind. And the great thing with backlists, of course, is that they usually continue earning you money. And that small publisher, Chocolate, has been acquired by a bigger independent publisher, Joffe Books. I learned something new there, because I didn't realize that you can specialize in making money out of backlist, relaunching books and bringing them to a whole new generation. So I'm just always learning. Every day is a school day.
Oh, that's amazing. And from your experience when you've been teaching creative writing and judging competitions, what's the most common mistake aspiring writers make?
Viewpoint. I consider myself the viewpoint police. Um, I'm not big on, I have to confess, I'm not big on omniscient, viewpoint or authorial intrusion. My personal preference is for either third person or first person. So you're in a character's mind and you see what they see and hear what they hear and know what they know and feel what they feel. And I find that even published authors are still getting notes on this from their editor. We need to be more under the skin of this character. You can't know what character B is thinking. You can only know what character A, if character A is viewpoint, you can only know what character A thinks character B is thinking, unless character B vocalizes it, or it's obvious because they've just biffed you on the nose, they're not happy with you or whatever. But you can't absolutely know, because I could smile at you and say how lovely this is, and all the time be thinking, I just want to leave now and go and get a McDonald's. You don't know what I'm thinking unless you're in my head. And that's the viewpoint thing that takes a while for people to get into. I mean, myself included. I actually got some short stories published that didn't have such a tight hold on viewpoint. But actually, that is where teaching and appraising is its own teacher, it's its own learning curve. When you have to say, what's wrong with that? And you think, I do that. So it's really helpful, actually.
Any other advice for aspiring writers?
Well, never give up. I'm living proof. Educate yourself, whether that is buying Writing Magazine or buying a writing guide or turning up at conferences or listening to podcasts, watching, we have a wealth of this free information online now, like podcasts and YouTube and similar platforms. There is education available to you. I wrote my first 2 books on the strength of my English O levels, and they were bilge. They're in a landfill somewhere, and it was the best place for them. I'm so glad they can't come back to haunt me. They were awful. And then I thought, well, maybe I don't know it all. maybe there's room for me to learn something. And I joined what was then called a correspondence course, which I then worked on for Writing Magazine, I believe, Home Study Division. Is that still going?
Yeah.
And it was a different company, but that I did it with, and they went bust actually. But by the end of that, I had tripled my course fee in magazine successes, fees from magazines for short stories. The guy I worked with, the tutor I worked with, he'd written for the BBC and various magazines. And once he realized that I was not aiming to be a hobby writer, not that there's anything wrong with that, but that wasn't my goal. My goal was to be a professional writer. He took a special interest. I was lucky and or fortunate maybe would be a better word. And he used to tell me, he used to give it to me straight. You're doing, you're not getting this because you're not doing that. And that's what you need. And so education, I think, is really important. I think learning to touch type is a boon. Not everybody wants to hear that. But why they don't teach touch typing and how to display a document properly in school, beyond me. My son, I helped him lay out his professional project for his degree, and I showed him the styles menu on Word, and he said, how come I'm at the end of all these years of education, it's the first time anybody's shown me how to make all your subheadings the same at one click? I said, I don't know. I don't know. I've often wondered the same. All these things, they just make a writer's life easier and make them professional, make them appear professional to editors. When you're sending your work in to editors, it's like turning up at an interview. You wash your hair and you shine your shoes. So when you send your manuscript in to a professional who works with words all day, or even if you're self-published and you're sending it directly to the reader, you want it to look as good as it can look, to be set out properly, everything spelled correctly, hopefully, and all these things. So the more you can learn about everything, including the business of publishing, as well as writing a book or a short story or a poem or whatever is your thing, the better.
I think that's absolutely brilliant advice. Thank you very much. You've achieved so much in your career. What's on the horizon for you?
Well, my next book is Over the Sea to Sky, and that's the third in a trilogy. And it's about these three sisters who were adopted. They were all adopted into the same family. So the first two books were Under a Summer Sky and A Sky Full of Stars. It's all set on the Isle of Skye, in case you're wondering about the word sky coming into all these. So it's the three sisters' stories. Each one gets a book. And this is the third sister. And on the face of it, in the other two books, she's been the settled, sensible one. But that obviously wasn't going to make a very good book. So I put all that in the bin for her in between book 2 and the beginning of book 3. So that comes out on the 5th of June in the UK in paperback, ebook, and audio. And it comes out in Canada and America a couple of days later, I think, with its own cover. Yeah, so that's it. Oh, and then a book that only came out in hardback, A Christmas Gift, is having its turn as a paperback a bit later in the year as well.
Amazing. Can't wait to get our hands on that one then.
Thank you very much.
And we always try and end the podcast by asking for a book recommendation. Have you got one for us? Other than mine,
Other than
obviously.
mine, yeah. I have just read Shadows in the Spring by Christina Courtney, who, full disclosure, is a friend of mine. So I got the book as an advanced reader copy. And it is kind of a companion to another book she has written. Or it's more as a spin-off, she's taken the character from another book. And this one's set mainly in the UK, and it's set around the Romans in Bath and beyond and in Norfolk. And she used to write a lot about Vikings. The last two books have been Roman, but she plays with time, which I quite like. So this is a dual timeline. but she has also written Time Slip and Time Travel. But this is a dual timeline. So I really enjoyed that. And so that's my recommendation.
Oh, amazing. We'll have to give that one a go as well. Is that one already out then as well?
No, I think it's out later in April. It
Okay.
might be the 15th.
Oh, amazing. So thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to come and speak to us. It's been a
You're
pleasure to
welcome.
speak to you. And I think our readers are really gonna um enjoy the notes that you've kind of given everybody. And there's so many tips and bits of advice that you've kind of shoehorned in. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us. It's been great.
Very welcome. I've enjoyed it. Thanks for inviting me. And sorry, I've got a bit of a cough.
That's all right.
Thank you, Sue.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into the Write Club. We hope you enjoyed this episode and feel inspired to keep writing. Don't forget to sign up for our newsletter at Writers Online, your go-to for writing tips, competitions and exclusive updates. Plus, you'll never miss an episode of the Write Club. Until next time, happy writing!